Modim Simcha. Good morning to everybody. I'm sure everybody had a fantastic Seder, and using that energy that they had and they're carrying it over into the Chol Hamoed, they're getting ready for the Shvi Shal Pesach, which is the second day of Yontif that's in the Pesach holiday. So let's just talk about that for a second. In Shvi Shal Pesach, there's a lot of questions that come to mind. Let's start with the first most basic question. Why do we even need a Shvi Shal Pesach? Why do we need a second holiday? Why do we need a second day of Yontif? If you look at all the other holidays, there's only one day. Sukkot is one day followed by 6 intermediate days. Then Shemini Atzeres is a totally different holiday. That's also one day. Let's take a look at Shavuos, the other one of the Shalosh Shagon. One day. So why do we need 2 days? We need this book-ending effect. You need one day in the beginning, one day at the end. Why do we need 2 separate days? Why is Pesach different than the rest of the Chagim? First question. Second question. So you might tell me that really the second day of Yontif is coming to celebrate Kriyas Yam Suf, which historically did happen on that day. That's true. But really, the Psukim don't even talk about that. They don't even give any mention to that. It just says that there's holiday also on the last day of Pesach. And that also gives rise to another question, which is really going to be our second question. Why do we need 2 sets of miracles? We had one tremendous revelation of God with the 10 plagues of Egypt. That really the Maral tell us that's really he redid the whole world. Those 10 plagues are connected the 10 utterances that God created the world with. He really recreated the world. That's tremendous. That's unbelievable. So why do we need a second whole new set of miracles at the crossing of the Yam Suf, of the Red Sea? Why do we need that? Why do we need 2 sets of miracles? What was wrong with the first set? Why do we need to have a second set of destruction of Egypt? The first one wasn't good enough. There was nothing left. Second question. Third question. We find something that only happens again in Pesach. It doesn't happen in the other holidays, and that is there is a fundamental shift in the order of our prayers. The first day of Pesach, we say Mashav Ruach HaMoed HaKashem, and then we switch. We start saying Moed HaTal in the middle of the holiday. Why would you switch in the middle of the holiday, change the prayers? And this is a significant switch. It's a switch that's gravity is so much that if you say the wrong thing, you have to go ahead and repeat your Shemona Esrei, your prayers. How could you switch in the middle of a holiday the prayers that need to be said? We found that there's a Shir Sayam only by the last day of Pesach. When they crossed the Yam Suf, there was no Shira said in the first day. Now you have to ask yourself, why would that be? When they left Mitzrayim the first time, they surely thought they were never going to see the Egyptians ever again. You would think that would be enough, that they would go ahead and give praise for them in the first place. Why only at the end, at the Kriyas Yam Suf, do we have the Oz Yashir? Do we have the Shir Sayam? Speaking of the Shir Sayam, we say that Rashi teaches us that the spoils from the Egyptians that was at the Yam Suf was much greater than what they took out of Mitzrayim itself. That the booty that they got over there was greater. How could that be? And why was the booty greater? And lastly, this is going to be our 6th question. We also have another thing on Pesach. We start counting the Sfira. The Sfira Sa'imah, we start counting it on the 2nd day. And that's what the Torah says in Machas HaShabbos. And the rabbis teach us that means from the 2nd day of Passover. But the question is, why start on the 2nd day? Why we always start things in the first day? Why is it pushed off to the 2nd day? So these are a few questions to think about of the 2nd day of Yontif to get us started. So we'll put down a couple of foundations, and hopefully with this we'll be able to build an approach that will answer all these questions. The Maral talks about the different holidays, rabbinical holidays that there are. He splits the year into 2. Let's picture like a black and white cookie. Part of it is in the rainy season, and part of it is in the summer season. In Israel, there are basically only really two seasons. There's the winter and the summer. And that's kind of reflected by our prayers. It's Mashav Ruach HaMoed HaKashem, and then there's the same bracha, which we give blessings on the dew that falls. So during the winter season, which is the rainy season, that's when we have the rabbinical holidays. That's when you have Purim, that's when you have Hanukkah. That happens during the rainy season. However, in the dry season, you have let's call it the more unfortunate time of the year. That's If Shavasar B'Tammuz. That's when we have Tisha B'Av. That's when the temple's destroyed. And that's when you have those rabbinical obligations. You see, it cuts perfectly down the middle. During the time of winter, which was the rain of course represents shefa, bracha, the goodness and the openness of the wellspring of goodness from God. That's clearly manifested in the world. Rain, everybody can see it. You can see it fall on the crops and it to grow. That time of the year, that's when we have the holidays. However, when there's just dew, that's the time of din, more of judgment. That's when we have that time of the year. That's when we have the rabbinical holidays of Tisha B'Av. That's the more sad part of the year. So that's the first concept. The second concept is there's awakening from above and awakening from below. That's Aseruha de Eila, Serusa de Sato. So what does this mean exactly? Awakening from above, that represents God doing the work. Awakening from below, that represents us doing the work. So in our context, the awakening from above, that's the beginning of Pesach. That's when that's the 10 plagues. Really, the Jews didn't have much to do with the 10 plagues and leaving Mitzrayim. That was all God. God beat the Egyptians mercilessly until finally they gave up and they threw in the towel. They said, "Get out of here. We don't have anything to do with you. Take your families, take your sheep, take everything, and just go. We want you out." That's the first thing. That's God doing the heavy lifting. And then there's a second phase. That's our work. That's the work of from the bottom of the people. That's awakening from the lower levels. In other words, it's not coming from up. Where does this inspiration come from? It's not just from God. It's from us. How does that work? We get inspired from God. First, it starts on the top. That flows down to us, and we take that inspiration, and then we go ahead and we work on that. And that's what you find. That's the Kriyas Yam Suf side of it. God is no longer He's doing miracles, but first we have to do something first. Let's take a look at Kriyas Yam Suf itself. Kriyas Yam Suf itself, Moses told the people, "Get going, jump in, let's get into the sea." And they look, and the sea is still there. So finally, Nachshu ben Aminadov, he jumps in, and he starts walking into the sea. Moses says it's going to split. It's going to split. It takes 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, up to his waist, up to his chest, nothing, up to his neck, just water. Finally, it reaches to his nose, and he's at the point of no return. That's it. Boom. Instantly, the waters start to part. They start to part in miraculous ways. 12 separate channels, each for their own tribes. Amazing stuff. But that's not doesn't split all the way to the end. The Beinu Bachya teaches us that it only split up to where they were up to. In other words, it's not like we think about it. We think about it that split perfectly, smooth, all clear, ready to go. It says no, it only split to where they were up to. Every step that they took, they had to go ahead and reaffirm their faith. Take another step, split more. Another step, and split more. That's what it is. It's showing us. It's the Sato Lasata. It's our awakening. It's our pushing forward that created the Kriyas Yam Suf. So there's really these 2 phases over here. There's the phase from God. That's phase of redemption. And there's a phase of us. That's the second phase of redemption. And the real purpose is not just for God to keep giving and giving and giving. It's for Him to awaken us from above, and for us to take that inspiration and go ahead and do our own work. So now let's go ahead and look at our questions. We see clearly why now there's 2 days of the holiday, why 1 day is not sufficient. Because the first day, it's almost as if there's 2 separate holidays. The first day, that's God waking us. That's God, the inspiration from heaven. That's the inspiration from above. That's God doing all the work. However, after we left, it flips. Now it's our turn to go ahead and do it. It's our turn to go ahead and begin the process and take that process. And that culminates at the end of Kriyas Yam Suf, where we go ahead and we do all the actions ourselves. And only after we go jump in, do we have the Kriyas Yam Suf. That's us taking the initiative. Of course, corresponds perfectly with the Mashav Ruach Mareh Gashen. That's God sitting down the Shefa in the beginning of the day, of the beginning of Pesach. We still use that formulation. However, it only is at night until the next morning. And then that's already, if you work it out the time-wise, that's already when the Israelites, when the Bnei Israel left Mitzrayim. You left Mitzrayim, now it's up to us. Therefore, we switch it already, by the Musaf prayer, we switch it to the same bracha that we have to go and start doing our part. So why of course, is there the Shira only by the Yam Suf, because by the Yam Suf, what's really the deeper, richer redemption? That's the redemption that God gave us, that happened when we left Mitzrayim. That was fantastic. We have Lil Seder, we love that. And we wouldn't be a nation without that. And we, of course, have everlasting gratitude because of that. But that's kind of like what's given to us. What's really, really deep and meaning is what we do ourselves. That occurred only at the Yam Suf. That second phase of redemption, that second phase where we said, we're the one doing it, that occurred at the Yam Suf. So what happened? Shira is not just a planned song that we have some planned spontaneity. It's something that comes in deep from within you. That you used to have a need to go out and give forth praise. That's what Shira is. So that only occurred. That's a natural thing that happens. It didn't really occur the first time because it was kind of unearned. But the second time when we did it, because of our lower inspiration that we grabbed, of course, from God in the first place, but we took it and we moved forward with it. That's why we say the Shira only at the end. That's already in the area of the same bracha that we go ahead and we're taking care of it. And that also answers, why do we start the counting the Sphira only at the end? We can't counting the Sphira only at the end. We can't count Sphira at the end because what is Sphira? Sphira is, that's about us continuing our process of correcting ourselves and getting ready. It's this 40-day process to go ahead to get to the end where we'll be prepared to receive the Torah on Har Sinai, Mount Sinai. So that's us. That's not God. And that could only that whole process only begins on the second day when we're already in the second phase of the redemption. We're out of the inspiration from above. We're now in the inspiration from ourselves. It's our own work. It's our whole hard work. And therefore, that's why the Sphira only starts. Of course, it only starts when that's about us already. It's about our work. So it starts the second day when we're talking about ourselves. And that's why the Shira, the spoils, the booty at the Yam is much bigger, because what is booty? What is the spoils? The spoils is something that you take and you put in your pocket for later. That's really what it's all about. It's all about, good, we had this tremendous opportunity, this tremendous revelation of God during the 10 plagues, Leil Seder. That's all great. But it's about our real work is to take that with ourselves. That's represented by the Yam Suf. That's represented by the lower inspiration, the lower awakening. And that's our work. And therefore we take that and we put that in our pocket and we say for later. That's what that represents. The end result of that is far greater than what we get from the awakening from above. And therefore it's the physical manifestation has the spiritual manifestation as well. And when you put it all together, we answer all our questions and we get ready to take all that we've gained from the inspiration from God on the first day of Pesach. We translated that into our own inspiration for the Chol HaMoed and of course for Shvi Shal Pesach. That gets us ready for the Sriyas Omer, which takes us all the way out to really what the end game is, what we're really trying to get to in the whole purpose is to get the Torah and Shavuos, and that's our message. That's our take, and wish everybody a wonderful Shvi Shal Pesach.